the Bills won, and they won easily. But this was a lot of positives here. This was a team that was not attempting a whole lot of passes, and they still didn't go crazy. But Josh Allen had his most pass attempts of the season this year with 33. And a lot was working in the passing game. Keon Coleman had a career high with 125 receiving yards. Khalil Shakir catches 7 passes. A lot of people were very worried about Khalil Shakir sort of disappearing. But there's an argument that Amari Cooper's presence makes these guys better because it allows Khalil Shakir to slide into a wide receiver 2 role, Keon Coleman into like a complementary wide receiver 3 role. So Amari Cooper as the wide receiver 1 with these 2 players, everything is pointing upwards for this Buffalo Bills team. And Josh Allen, 0 interceptions, and he has 15 touchdowns. Now he's got a wide receiver 1. Everything is sort of ticking up for these Buffalo Bills. Very, very smart trade. And if you can you buy low on Amari Cooper for somebody that thinks they're maybe selling high because he got a touchdown his first week? For me, Amari Cooper is a buy in redraft right now. Kick the tires, see if you can't make that trade happen.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's going on? That's Theo Gremminger with Fantasy Points, and I'm here to give you the 12 biggest reactions to fantasy football's Week 7. We're giving you fantasy football insights every single week here at Fantasy Points, and we're going to get your week started right. It's talking about Week 7. This was a mixed one, but we got to start out with Drake Maye, because Drake Maye last week finishes as QB 12 overall. This week, even better. Heading into Sunday Night Football, Drake Maye is QB 3 on the week. 276 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes, and this is with New England getting blown out. So last week, Drake Maye gives us a QB1 performance. This week looks like he's going to give us a top 5, top 6 QB performance, even if the QBs on Sunday and Monday night go nuts. Drake Maye is a fantasy-friendly QB for us. Big arm, mobile, willing to take shots, and the game flow, it's going to be perfect for us as fantasy managers because this New England team is rough. This team's going to be trailing all the time. Drake Maye, if you didn't pick him up last week and he's available in your league this week, big-time waiver wire addition. When this year's schedule released, there was one game that fantasy managers were circling in terms of a revenge game, and that's Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley going into MetLife Stadium against the Giants. These Eagles haven't been perfect. Last week against Cleveland was a choppy game, but Saquon let Giants fans know what they are missing in a massive way. Going up against the franchise that drafted him, he went absolutely nuts. He had the second most rushing yards that he's ever had in an NFL game. 17 carries, 176 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Also added 2 catches. The Eagles won. Saquon is doing his thing. He is a top 3 running back in football right now. And with the way that the New Orleans Saints offense looks, expect for Saquon to move up to closer to 1. There's a couple guys behind, and we're going to talk about a couple of those running backs coming up. But Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley are both looking legit. This is the year of the free agent running back. Free agent running backs are absolutely crushing it in fantasy football, and Saquon Barkley is one of them. If you drafted him, congratulations, you might have a league winner. Now, for the first month of the season, Bijan Robinson was not a bust, but he was a disappointment. We knew there was a lot more that he was capable of if this Atlanta coaching staff decided to use him in that way. And the last 2 weeks have been exactly why fantasy managers were pushing Bijan Robinson up to RB2 overall in redraft and in best ball. And the reason that almost everybody had him as the RB1 in Dynasty. Bijan last week, we talked about him right here. Bijan had a fantastic game last week. Last week, he gave you 2 rushing touchdowns, 95 rushing yards, and 3 receptions on minimal targets, like 4 of them. Nothing great, nothing spectacular. This week was even better. Bijan put up another massive scoring line, and he scored another first half touchdown. But the yardage and the receiving all ticked up. Last week gives you 10 receiving yards. This week gives you 40. This week he gives you a season high 103 rushing yards. And the important thing here is that he had 21 rush attempts. And this is his season high in rush attempts. So he gets 25 points last week, 23 points this week. Bijan Robinson is absolutely who you drafted, and the Falcons realize it. He is in store for a very strong rest of the season. And sticking at the running back position, let's keep it going. We talked about Barkley. We talked about Bijan. Why don't we talk about Tank Bigsby? Because Tank Bigsby may have just taken the job in Jacksonville, and this is a significant outcome because Tank Bigsby is a second-year player. Drafted in the third round out of Auburn, very disappointing rookie year. But this year has been terrific. And we obviously had the frustrating week last week against Chicago, but we find out early in the morning, and a shout out to anybody on the West Coast who slept in, Travis Etienne out for the game. We thought he might be out all week long. They confirm it, and Tank Bigsby played fantastic. Jacksonville won, and Tank Bigsby had 118 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He's had 90 or more rushing yards in 3 out of the last 4 games. And 2 out of the last 3 games that Bigsby's had these monster rushing outputs have been Jacksonville Jaguar wins. They're only 2 wins of the season. So Tank Bigsby, if you got him off the waiver wire a couple weeks ago, he could end up being one of the best waiver wire pickups of the year if you're not counting Jordan Mason, who you probably picked up in the preseason or drafted. Tank Bigsby looks terrific. And even if Travis Etienne comes back soon, I cannot imagine they're going to take the rock out of Tank Bigsby's hand. He has definitely prolonged Doug Peterson's coaching life in Jacksonville. And the final running back to talk about was the best one on the week. And post-bye week usage is something that we love to look for. We love to see players ticking up post-bye week. And Jahmyr Gibbs looks like that guy. Detroit comes out of their bye week, and they have absolutely smoked the Dallas Cowboys last week. And then this week, they won a close game against the Minnesota Vikings. They give Minnesota their first loss of the season, and Jahmyr Gibbs has his best week of the season. And Jahmyr Gibbs, what's really interesting, and this is what we talk about with post-bye week, is Gibbs had 2 games with 0 catches in back-to-back weeks heading into the bye week. Ever since they've come back, last week he had a 19% target share. This week, a 16% target share. So they're back to utilizing Gibbs in the passing game. And Gibbs was an absolute monster when it came to the rushing game. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. He finishes with 32 fantasy points. I mean, this is exactly what we've been waiting for with Jahmyr Gibbs. Gives you a 32-point week. This is his best week of the season. And it's been really, really solid for Gibbs. He's only had 1 game this season with fewer than 16 PPR points. And this week, he gives you a season high in rushing yardage with 116 and a season high in receiving yards with 44. Gets you those 4 catches. So 3 catches last week and 4 catches this week. Gibbs is back to being that two-way threat that we drafted. And we talk about the older running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs is a threat to catch up with some of those guys. David Montgomery is going to get utilized every single week, but with the quality of this offense, the way they're steamrolling people, and Jahmyr Gibbs' role, expect for Jahmyr Gibbs to finish this season extremely strongly. Now, I bet you're expecting me to talk about Joe Mixon because Joe Mixon had a really big game. Joe Mixon had 2 rushing touchdowns. He's just been terrific this season. But I got to talk about the lack of pass attempts in Houston. This was a very, very weird one. You had CJ Stroud with one of his worst games as a pro. And this is game 2 of losing Nico Collins. So last week, everything was sort of coming up Houston. They took it to the New England Patriots. Maybe that was just because of the quality of the opponent. Because this week on the road in Green Bay, the Houston passing game was non-existent. A lot of people sort of blaming Bobby Slowick for this, and I think some blame goes to him, but also there was a lot of inefficiency with Houston when they did attempt to pass. So Houston only had 21 pass attempts, which is very, very, very low. This is way lower than even the worst team in the NFL is averaging. So this is a super low pass attempt game, especially considering what a tight game this was. Instead, Houston completely leaned on the running a game. 33 rush attempts to 21 pass attempts. If you have Joe Mixon, you're hoping this is a trend. But if you have CJ Stroud or Stephon Diggs or Tank Dell, then you really want this thing to turn around. And Tank Dell, I was hyped about Tank Dell last week. I wrote about him in articles this week. I talked about him on podcasts. And Tank Dell goes out, 4 targets, 0 catches, an absolute dud for a player that most people had ranked inside of their wide receiver 2 line. Tank Dell has got to turn this around. We want to keep an eye on this Houston passing game and make sure that we don't need to adjust them moving forward too severely. But this Green Bay game, all rush attempts, not a lot of pass attempts at all. They lose the game by 2 points. We really got to keep an eye on this one. Another player who was a huge letdown this week, we talked about the Saquon Barkley game. So a lot of this had to do with Saquon. And we had another big A.J. Brown week. A.J. Brown gives you 5 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. But what's going on with DeVonta Smith? 2 weeks back, where DeVonta Smith just is not getting the targets that we're used to seeing with him. And it's really been a tick down in terms of targets, pass attempts from this entire offense, especially when you consider that Philly was missing Dallas Goedert this week. And in previous seasons, when we had a split where an Eagles pass catcher was missing, the others would tick up. This year, DeVonta Smith starts out the season with 3 straight weeks with 7 receptions. Then he misses week 4. Week 5 is the bye week. He comes back, and it's been 4 receptions combined on only 6 targets combined in 2 weeks. We saw DeVonta Smith have 8 targets, 10 targets, 10 targets to start out the year. So this is an odd one. And we had really expected after the first 3 weeks of the season that this was going to be a potentially huge year for DeVonta Smith. The last 2 weeks, maybe we need to adjust our expectations. They do have a get-right game next week against Cincinnati in Cincy, a game where Philly's going to have to put up some points. Cincinnati at home, strong offensive team. This is not going to be like the Browns and the Giants. This is going to be Philly having to bring it next week. Maybe we see DeVonta Smith maybe have a big potential post-bye breakout week, but not good stuff these first 2 weeks from him. Odd things going on with this target share. One more huge loser from this week, and really the worst one. There was a lot of hope with fantasy managers that the Miami wide receivers, especially Tyreek Hill, but there was some hope for Jalen Waddle, that they would be able to get things a little bit corrected during the bye week. And instead, it was anything but. This was a disaster of a performance. We have not seen Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle combined finish for one single wide receiver 2 or better performance since week 1. So any hope you had that these guys were going to come out after the bye week and just ball out, Tyreek Hill has 1 catch for 8 yards. Jalen Waddle has 1 catch for 11 yards. They combined for 4 targets. This team, this offense is completely broken. We want to keep an eye on this one. Apparently, we're getting Tua Tagovailoa coming back, but this is an offense where we cannot trust any of these pass catchers. A lot of you were benching them sort of before the bye week, but the idea was maybe just ramp up Tyreek Hill this week post-bye week. I know I had Tyreek in some lineups. I don't think we can trust them if Tua Tagovailoa is not back on the field next week. Huge letdown performance for the Miami Dolphins, and especially their wide receivers. You cannot trust these guys. And this is a situation in a team where they're averaging the fewest points per game in the entire NFL right now. And this was a team where last year they were towards the top of the NFL. They were top 3 in scoring for most of the season. So this is a about as severe a downgrade for an offense as it gets. They were averaging 12 points per game heading into this game, and they scored 10, lost 16-10 to Indianapolis. And Indianapolis did not play well, but they're still able to get a win over Miami. Really, really tough sledding if you drafted a lot of Miami. And a lot of you out there, you're holding Miami Dolphins stacks in best ball. Those ones are dead in the water. Now, one big positive this week, we saw Amari Cooper traded this week from Cleveland to Buffalo. And this is a really, really strong outcome that we saw in week 1, where Amari Cooper only played 18 snaps. So they broke him in. But in those 18 snaps, he gets 4 catches for 66 receiving yards and a touchdown on 5 targets. So 5 targets in that minimal a snap share is super significant. He might end up pushing for 9 or so targets a week in this offense once he gets ramped up. And the Bills won, and they won easily. But this was a lot of positives here. This was a team that was not attempting a whole lot of passes, and they still didn't go crazy. But Josh Allen had his most pass attempts of the season this year with 33. And a lot was working in the passing game. Keon Coleman had a career high with 125 receiving yards. Khalil Shakir catches 7 passes. A lot of people were very worried about Khalil Shakir sort of disappearing. But there's an argument that Amari Cooper's presence makes these guys better because it allows Khalil Shakir to slide into a wide receiver 2 role, Keon Coleman into like a complementary wide receiver 3 role. So Amari Cooper as the wide receiver 1 with these 2 players, everything is pointing upwards for this Buffalo Bills team. And Josh Allen, 0 interceptions, and he has 15 touchdowns. Now he's got a wide receiver 1. Everything is sort of ticking up for these Buffalo Bills. Very, very smart trade. And if you can trade, can you buy low on Amari Cooper for somebody that thinks they're maybe selling high because he got a touchdown his first week? For me, Amari Cooper is a buy in redraft right now. Kick the tires, see if you can't make that trade happen. And we got to talk about it every single week, but Jordan Love is going to lead the NFL in touchdown passes this year. He's averaging 3 touchdown passes a game now, 15 touchdown passes on the season. He's tied with Baker Mayfield, and Baker hasn't played on Monday Night Football. Baker's going to be still leading the NFL probably when we're done with Monday Night Football. Baker's playing really well. But we've got to talk about Jordan Love. And the interceptions, I know. But in my league, interceptions cost you less than you gain on touchdown passes. So we don't love seeing the interceptions, but Jordan Love, the gunslinger, is here. This is a confident quarterback throwing for touchdown passes. Anyone who missed the touchdown pass to Tucker Kraft today, ridiculous rope that Jordan Love connected on. A perfect pass. This is a player that missed 2 weeks of the season, but Jordan Love is looking like one of the players you're going to need to compete in fantasy football this year. This is a terrific player, 15 touchdown passes on the season, and he's missed 2 weeks. Leads the NFL in touchdown passes per game. And we've got to talk about the trades this week. We mentioned Amari Cooper. All the talk this week was on Amari Cooper and DaVante Adams and what they would do to players like Aaron Rodgers, what they would do for Josh Allen, what they would do to Garrett Wilson. But the story today was the players that were left behind, and namely the tight ends, the post-trade tight end winners. Brock Bowers, 14 targets, 10 catches, 93 yards. That is your number 1 option in Vegas. David Njoku, 10 catches, 76 yards, and David Njoku gets you 14 targets. This is a wild performance to get 2 tight ends with 14 targets. This is one where both of these players, it would actually be surprising if they didn't lead their teams in targets and in catches for the rest of the season. So Njoku gets the big touchdown reception. He gives you by far his biggest fantasy week of the season. That's one where he's looking like a post-Amari Cooper trade winner. But Brock Bowers, we've also got to talk about Brock Bowers because Brock Bowers has played 7 NFL games, And right now he's 15th all-time in catches by a rookie tight end. He only needs 40 to break Sam Laporta's record of last year. And right now, Brock Bowers is somewhat projected to challenge Puka Nacua. We don't want to get too crazy here, but Brock Bowers is averaging 7 catches a game. There is a chance that he's going to catch more passes than Puka did last year. Puka had 105. Bowers can pass him by. This is a 21-year-old rookie tight end. He's special. But if you have Bowers, you're loving life. And if you have David Njoku, you're loving life as well. We got to wrap it up with injuries. Negative note. Jaden Daniels didn't finish the game. Marcus Mariota came in, played very, very well. Jaden Daniels is dealing with, it looks like, a rib injury. This is one where we don't know the severity of it. Make sure you're checking back on Monday and seeing what's going on there. Then DK Metcalf, knee injury. We don't know what's going on there or the severity. But the worst one, Brandon Ayuk, looks like it could be a torn ACL. Brandon Ayuk, this is catastrophic for Brandon Ayuk fantasy managers. I'm Theo Gremminger. Stick with us all week right here, Fantasy Points. We've got you covered on the YouTube channel. If you like this video, hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, and we got you covered all season long.